Okay, Chavra. So we're holding by our fifth shir, and we're getting into the words where Rabbeinu Arizal describes the Tzimtzum. Right? Until now, we've discussed how everything that's going to be revealed after the Tzimtzum is already contained by way of pure potential within the infinite light prior to the creation of the world. The reason we want to make sure that we understand that is because we have to be aware that the infinite light prior to the creation of the world is not God himself. There's never a point in which God himself enters into the discussion. He's the basis of all thinking and thought and process, but grasping and thinking, we're only talking about God's revelations. And so because we're already talking about a revelation even before creation, so then it's not so difficult to say that all of the potential worlds that would be revealed later on were already contained by way of pure potential. Now obviously we can't say they actually existed because that's kfira, because even though Or Ein Sof is not the essence of God, we treat it as if it were an expression, a direct expression of the essence of God. So you can't say there's levels or distortion there. So that's why we use the turn of phrase that Rav Yitzchak, based on all of the writings of the Rebbe Rashab, cultivates, which is Metzias she'ena b'metzias, a non-existent existence. Right? The existent potential form prior to any actual existence. Now it's interesting, this phrase, Metzias she'ena b'metzias, I saw in two other places. One is Rav Hutner, Schusei Hagan Aleinu, uses it to describe the Metzius of Shadim, of demons, because he has a real psychological inversion of the concept of demons, right? Like based on the Rambam, that the Rambam said that these things don't exist in necessarily a metaphysical sense, but rather they're embodied phenomenon. And the Kotzker Rebbe said, how could it be that the Rambam paskins against the Mefurish halacha that these things exist? Says the Kotzker, once the Rambam paskin that they don't exist anymore, they stopped existing, and now they exist as the ideas that the Rambam felt that they were. But Rav Dessler already describes how, when the Gemara discusses the notion of doing a mitzvah under the compulsion of a shin dalid, right? If you eat matzah on Leil Pesach, compelled by a demonic force, so then what's the halachic status? And Rav Dessler there is already speaking about obsessions and compulsions and all sorts of kind of psychic content. But Rav Hutner in a letter goes very clear, and he says that these concepts are real and they're not real at the same point. They're as real as the energy that we give to them in our thoughts. But the moment our thoughts stop paying attention to these entities or concepts, they cease to exist because they're no longer being paid attention to. And so he says it's like an existence that's also a non-existence. So he uses this lashon of Metzias she'ena b'metzias by Shin Dalids. And Rav Tzadok HaKohen Melublin in Resisei Laila, in a remarkable teaching about Amalek, he describes the nature of Amalek as a Metzias she'ena b'metzias, as a non-existent existence. Because the nature of it, the existence of Amalek would seem to imply the absence of God. And the absence of God is a pure impossibility. And therefore, the concept of Amalek, which seems to create the notion that there's something other than God, they exist only as far as our job is to come to realize that they don't truly exist, that no such thing could ever exist. Because everything has to have a spark that animates it. And Amalek is no different. So what's the spark, says Rav Tzadok, that animates Amalek? It's the future revelation that they never truly existed. And so we see, and there's a way of being machaber, these three terms, Metzias she'ena b'metzias, a non-existent existence. I'm going back deliberately because this is how the Chachma is learned, that we're just repeating singular principles. This Metzias she'ena b'metzias we also referred to in the teachings of Rabbeinu Azriel of Gerona as koyach hagvul bebilti gvul, right? The potential towards limitation that existed in an unlimited way. We also saw in Mishalim from Chabad that it's referred to, not Chabad, it's the Sefer Yetzirah, that it's the shalheves hakeshura begacheles, it's the flame that's contained within the coal itself. Or the even hachalamish, right? The spark that exists within the flintstone. Or, as the Alter Rebbe brings down in Shar Yichud V'Emunah, as the rays of light that are contained within the source of light itself. All of these metaphors, each one reflecting a different thing, but they all come to point to the pre-existence of potential, even prior to actualization. Why is this important? Because when we encounter the Tzimtzum, what we're really going to be understanding is that the Tzimtzum is what enables this capacity of limitation to come into being, to unfold. The Tzimtzum is what enables the revelation of God's capacity towards limitation. It's the emergence of the Shalhelas from within the Gehelas. The flame is now being revealed from within the coal, or the spark is coming out of the stone, or the sun ray is emerging from the sun. That's the Tzimtzum. It's what enables God's revelation. Everybody with me so far?
The Shekhinah is a Tzimtzum?
The Shekhinah is exactly right. The Shekhinah is ultimately the Tzimtzum. Hashem's decision to reveal himself is the Tzimtzum. And the way in which Hashem reveals himself through the Tzimtzum is the Shekhinah. That's the divine presence within reality that appears to be separate and apart from godliness, right? Because like we said, even in the Arizal, when we're talking about the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we can, by way of metaphor, say that it can be seen as the Malchus de Ein Sof. That the loftiest notions that we're ever talking about, the higher grasp, the higher power that we can grasp, is ultimately always only the lowest rung of the previous level. I just saw in the Leshem that we treat the lowest rung of the previous level, at whatever point of reference we are in our conception of godliness, as God himself. That's what we're davening. We're davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
The next rung that you have yet to reach.
The next rung, the Malchus of the next rung, that which is
above Kesser.
It's above Kesser. It's the tippy top of Kesser. It's what we refer to as Reishul Loas Yada. But I don't want to get into the particularity of the point that I just made. It's an important point, but all I want to say is that Or Ein Sof is Or Ein Sof. It's not that we're not davening directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God forbid. It's not that we're engaged in the attributes of God or these secondary extensions of God. Heaven forbid. We daven like a child who davens directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Elav v'lo lemidosav. We daven to him and not to any of his traits, no matter how lofty those traits might be. But at the same point, we know that there's a profound interdiction and prohibition against anybody ever claiming that they can lay claim to the absolute infinite essence of God. That's the starting point of any Makubal, or any Tzaddik, or any Yid knows this. And so, which is it? Is it directly to him and not to his attributes? Or is it that I can't ever experience him directly, and all I can experience are his attributes, which are the worlds? Mm-hmm.
Why is Tefillah assuming that you are... Why is that a question? Meaning, that assumes that the way that you're referencing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we associate with him, is not necessarily also what happens when we daven, right? You're davening to someone as opposed to kind of subsuming yourself or connecting yourself with an idea. Aren't they somewhat different?
I think if I understand your question correctly, and I might kind of curtail it because I don't want to go, but Tefillah is directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvaydo v'atzmo. We daven directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't daven to the Midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't daven to the light of Keser and the Olam of Atzilus as it expresses itself within Zer Anpin. No matter how lofty the revelations are, we're davening directly towards the Baal Haratzon Kavyachol, the master of all of existence, when every trait is ultimately just an extension from him. That's direct. So all of the different stations along the way of Tefillah, and the different worlds and the different spheros that a person is machavin to, that's kind of like the map and the territory that Hashem is revealing himself to. But we're never getting stuck in the map, heaven forbid. Right? The map is not the territory. The map is the map. And mistaking the map for the territory itself is tantamount to trying to eat a menu. Meaning, and that's missing out. Forget about the theological issues that come about. Am I addressing kind of what you're saying? So the real question is, so let's say, meaning tefillah mideoraisa, which is based tzara, right? Based tzara, what am I doing? What am I crying out to? And this is what, ultimately what we're doing is we're davening to dasatino. We're davening the same way that the the young child in its innocence understands the dynamic of finite talking to the infinite source of all things. But then Ha'adam asa es adam yashar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu asa es adam yashar, Hashem made us yashar, and we requested a lot of complications and we get stuck. But the main thing is a love, directly to Him. But then the question is, but all we have access to are the worlds and the midos and after the Tzimtzum. So the way that Rav Yitzchak masbir it, based on the Ben Ish Chai, based on the Leshem, based on the Gra, based on Ramchal, based on Yosher Levav, based on Baal Shem Tov and all of the tzaddikim, that it's both and at the same time. That we are directly crying out to God Himself. And we are profoundly limited in our capacity to ever conceivably reach God Himself. What happens is, it's a love biderech midosav. To Him by way of His traits. We're reaching out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the worlds and the levels that He reveals. So we're not davening to the worlds or those levels, heaven forbid, which are empty as anything else is without the animating light of God. Nor are we making the paganistic mistake of thinking that we can run childishly up to the infinite itself. Right? Any person in the middle of the jungle could experience, pure infinitude if you experience it in some state of intoxication. That's not the Chiddush. Chiddush is not infinitude. The Chiddush is hislabshus, the enguardment of the light within Torah and Mitzvos. That's the secret. And so we're not a love, nor are we only to His midos. It's a love b'derech midosav, to Him by way of His traits. So when I am mechaber myself, when I make myself a merkava for the parts of Zer Anpin of the world of Atzilus, and I draw down the moichin, and I draw down consciousness, what I am doing is I am drawing down elokus into my consciousness. I'm not getting stuck in any parts or systems or analysis of the worlds in some, sophistry. What I'm doing is I'm directly attaching myself to the infinite light that's coming down in the form of Shefa. But the only way to do that is by going through the map, by going through step after step after step.
Their consciousness is
The Giluyim, the revelation of all of the worlds and all of the levels, is only post-Tzimtzum. Before Tzimtzum, all of the levels existed only by way of pure potential. The purpose of the Tzimtzum is to reveal the levels so that now we can actually have the ability to grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu in an organized and systematic way, which is most miraculously conveyed, and the Tamsitz of it all is the Torah and the Mitzvos. That radical technology.
It seems like the experience I want to have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like following through various different places on the map. It's similar to a relationship one has with their parent, which is the older you get, the more you understand that relationship and how it works. Is that what
It comes with das. A person. There's rules and regulations towards how a person experiences the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how a person draws down the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the system that the Arizal is megala to us. Now, ultimately, the purpose of all of this chachma that we're reading about in Otzros Chaim and Eitz Chaim is, what's the true purpose of a tree? Is the fruit of the tree. And what's the fruit of the tree? That's pre-Eitz Chaim. Pre-Eitz Chaim is where you daven, and you meditate, and you process existence in accordance with these teachings, right? Where you're actually engaged. And what does the Ari say? If a person has the intentions laid out in this system when they're praying, it's as if the shefa that is coming down into the world is done in partnership with their work. Right? That's ultimately what we're talking about here. How much are we going to get to experience the pathways in which we ascend up to Hashem and we draw Hashem down? The infant child who's born as a yid, in that tiny brain and that brain wave of faith, at whatever point it begins, when they begin to eat wheat, that's the same potency of faith as the greatest mukubal in the world. It's the faith in the same exact thing. Right? Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere. There's no two separate gods. But obviously there's going to be a big difference in terms of the experience and the process of having moved through these layers and parts. Yeah? The purpose in all of this, and I know it's going to sound counterintuitive, but the Arizal system is a constrictive system. Right? Yitzchak is the name of Din. He was zoicha to these teachings on the banks of the Nile River. Meaning, in terms of the Giluyim, he's a tzaddik that's associated with the third revolution in Pnimius HaTorah, which is Bina. Shmoina Sha'arim of the Arizal, Shmoina is Bina, Sha'arim is Bina. Otzros Chaim has 50 gates. It's all Bina oriented. What's Bina? It's levels. The Arizal is revealing that the more levels there are, meaning the more apparent difference that there appears to be, the greater the revelation of godliness when you ascend back through those apparent separate levels and you transform them by way of bittul and kavana and emunah to be nothing other than God's revelations. That's the benefit that comes about.
I love the menu analogy because like eating, you just eat what's in front of you. But here it's almost like the menu kilo is revealing what's there.
But what's the appetite? It whets the appetite. It reveals what's there, and it gives a person the ability to know like what's available in the world. Right? The more the Otzros Chaim, to eat from the Otzros Chaim is to take seriously one's role in avodah Hashem. Right? To take one's spirituality seriously. To know that our spiritual work is significant in the eyes of God. This is what people want to feel at one of the cores is significance. Significance, right? Loneliness is the opposite of significance, right? Where a person does not feel, when a person feels insignificant, we know what that feels like. Signification, signs, connectivity, to feel significant in the eyes of Hashem, in the eyes of others, in the eyes of ourselves, that's the goal. And so Chazal revealed to us a fundamental secret, which is avodah l'tzarach gavoa. Avodah l'tzarach gavoa is spiritual work for an elevated purpose. It's already brought down in the Kadmoinim and Rav Meir ibn Gabbai, but that Hashem chooses to allow us to enter into a partnership with Him to the degree that, to the best of our reasoning, we are playing a fundamental role in the cosmic process of Hashem's revelation. The recognition that it makes no difference whatsoever whether we shecht from the neck or we shecht from the arm, as Chazal themselves said, right? Avodah shaloi l'tzarach gavoa is the recognition that the truth of the matter is that Hashem created Rishayim and He created Tzadikim, and it's pretty unclear as to which one is going to give more kavod to Hashem. And from that perspective, that the same way the praise of God ascends from Gan Eden, it ascends from Gehenna. There's nothing outside of God's infinite revelation. That means there's no distortion and no distinction. The only way for the human being to maintain some signification in their lives is to feel that their particular placement in existence has signification. And in Torah Arizal, the human being becomes the center. And just at the center in this cosmic drama. And ultimately, it's to come to realize that we're nothing but the revelation of Hashem's infinite light, which is that we're in Merkava. Everybody with me so far? I don't think we're meandering too far. So the Tzimtzum is the pathway that the levels move from pure potential into actualization. That's how we're going to understand the backdrop of the Tzimtzum. It's a concealment for the sake of revelation. The darkening of the sun to allow the sunlight to shine forth. Right? The darkening of the source so that the part can emerge. Externally, what it's going to look like is that Tzimtzum is this drama of concealment. It's a drama of removal. It appears to make an empty space. But as we're going to understand, and it's not explicit in Otzros Chaim, but it's explicit in all of the Meforshim, especially the Leshem Shol V'Chaloma and Chassidus, is that the Tzimtzum is not Kipshuto. It's not an actual absence of God, but rather it's the revelation of Hashem's capacity to conceal Himself. Hashem is now revealing Himself into the Koyach HaGvul, as the Koyach HaGvul. Now that the static form of perfection has receded into the horizon, the dynamism at the heart of divine revelation can begin to unfold, and that's the Seder HaHishtalshelis that takes place from the Tzimtzum and onwards. Leshem Shvo V'Chaloma says that before the Tzimtzum, all we have is the Rambam. Right? Which means that I don't know you, I can't claim you, I can't define you, I can't name you, all I can do is grasp you by way of negation. After the Tzimtzum, all we have is the Arizal. The Arizal gave us the map, based on the Zohar HaKadosh, in the three main Chalakim, Idr Rabba, Idr Zuta, and Safar Ditznus. So this is the map. So this is the Lashon of Rav Chaim Vital. saw last week, that it arose with his infinite will to reveal revelation, for the known reason, which is ultimately for the purpose of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being referred to as compassionate and caring. Because if there was no world, who's going to receive compassion from him? And if there's nobody receiving compassion from him, how can he be referred to as a compassionate one? Hashem has potencies that need to be revealed into actualization. So how does this happen? Then the infinite light contracted itself at the center of its light. And what do we mean by the center? B'nekudas hamerkaz emtzayis shabo, at the innermost point that's rested at the center. V'sham samsem atzmo el hatzadim v'hasvivos. And it's from that point, umisham, from that point, from the innermost point of the circle, HaKadosh Baruch Hu contracted his presence backwards, almost like a movement, a retraction backwards, leaving that vacant space in the very middle. Almost like a ripple effect, right? That the tiny pebble drops and it makes a ripple, and then what happens is that surface level of the water ripples back and it kind of makes space for something that wasn't there beforehand. V'nishar halal bentayim. And in that retraction of the infinite light that had previously saturated that middle point, what is left in its wake is a halal, a void. V'zeh hayat tzimtzum harishon shel hama'atzil ha'elyon. And this is the first tzimtzum of the emanator, blessed be he. Now, like we've said already, this is not the first tzimtzum that allows us to enter into the discussion of godliness. It's the first tzimtzum in the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital as he received it from his Rebbe, the Arizal. So just to read the translation in English once more, and then we'll go into it. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu contracted himself at the center of his light, at the innermost center point within it, and it's there that he contracted himself backwards towards the sides and the periphery. And as a result, what remained in the midst, in that center point from which he contracted outwards, was a halal, bentayim, in between them, or I'm thinking about it now more in like a temporal framework, that for the time being it appears to be a halal. V'zeh hayat tzimtzum harishon shel hama'atzil ha'elyon. This is the first tzimtzum of the ma'atzil. What does it mean it's the first tzimtzum? It's the first tzimtzum that enables us to refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the ma'atzil ha'elyon. Sure, there were many tzimtzumim, the tzimtzum lahafliya, tzimtzum ritzonis, Hashem's decision to enter into possibility, but we have no relationship with him on those levels, and there's no calling him a ma'atzil ha'elyon, because the ma'atzil is only after, like the Ari said, right, that it was kisha'ala b'ritzono ha'pashut laha'atzil ha'na'atzalim. This is already a new stage of revelation, where Hashem wants to reveal something other. And the first tzimtzum that enables us, as the other, to recognize God as the creator is this tzimtzum. Any questions so far, Chevra? Yeah. How could there be a center point? How could there be a center point? Based on everything we've said until now. How can there be a center point? The Arizal here, it seems to be explicitly going against the basic tenets of what Rav Chaim Vital has been teaching us until now. Now, I've already brought kind of the introductions from elsewhere in, so I don't think it'll be as strong of a question. But when we talk about Or Ein Sof, for all of my talk about how there's levels within Or Ein Sof, and there's a Koyach HaGvul, B'Bilti Gvul, and all of this like relativizing of infinitude, it's also fundamentally important to maintain the words of the Ravid in the introduction to his commentary on Sefer Yetzirah in front of our eyes, which is anybody who comes and attributes or places levels within the emanator, blessed be he, is over the isser of kind of kfira, because you're now dividing God, and God is indivisible. So we have to hold the two paradoxical elements of this equation very firmly at the very same moment. There's no other way to make it through the pardes. There's no other way to come and eat from the Otzros Chaim unless a person learns the secret of das, which is the ability to hold two opposing postulates at once together in a way that's not only tolerating opposites, but in a way that the opposition itself reveals a fusion that fuels an even deeper light.
I would say that, to answer that, the second that you pull back, in the context of infinity, once there is a point that is no longer part of that, or that is different, that automatically becomes your center of perception.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely, 100%. Like Rabbi Nachman has the Torah on the Sabbath de Yasuna, that the Greek wise ones, when they came to Chazal and they said, "Emsuusa da'olam heichan," where's the middle of the world? And he said, "Here," because wherever Hillel Azaken lived with this nekuda, "Mani kan akol kan." It's not grandiose. It's the ontology of self. If I am here, consciousness is eminent from right here, right now. So where I stand is the center. But that's not. But the lashon of Rahu implies that this center point was even pre-existent to one degree or another. The Tzimtzum, right? So what you're describing makes 100% sense. That once there's a Tzimtzum, wherever that Tzimtzum is chal is the center point. But over here in the lashon of Rav Chaim Vital, Tzamsim amsvo ba'emsa ha'or shelo b'nekudas hamerkaz emsoy shelo. There's the implication, especially in that doubled language, that there's a nekudas hamerkaz. There's an innermost point. This is the Ramchal. The Ramchal takes everything from this innermost point, because, and just to give like my understanding of an answer, is that if the infinite light prior to the creation of the world was God himself, so to speak, so then it's impossible to claim that there was any pre-existent shape or space or makom or trace of anything. But once we're already operating with the sense that Or Ein Sof, prior to the creation of the world, is a revelation of God's essence and not identifiable with God's essence, so then we need to be delicate, but we can now make space for pure potential and pure potency to be existing there even before the Tzimtzum. Mamela, what's happening in the Tzimtzum? The potential of limitation is now coming into clarity, right? When the light dissipates, the candle can shine. When the light is shining forth, the candle has no purpose. So it's the departure of the sun that enables the flame to shine itself. If there was the possibility of existence and limitation within the infinite light prior to creation, the Tzimtzum itself is what reveals that potential that was always already there. So when the Rahu is saying that Hashem is Kavyachol being Metzamsem himself, B'nekudas Hamerkaz Emsai Shabo, yeah, that means that there's a Malchus Tein Sof Kavyachol, that Hashem already has a plan in store as to what he wants to be revealing. Existence is not God removes himself, now let's see what happens. Existence is the slow and steady unfolding of God's potential into actualization, which will ultimately culminate with the full revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to our relative grasps.
Okay, I get it that Or Ein Sof is not a Shem, and that therefore
Yeah.
it could be a center.
Yeah.
But if it's Or Ein Sof, it's infinite, so that would imply they're infinite centers. So either he picked the center, or Ein Sof was already predicated on the center he was going to reveal. Which one is it?
Meaning, or Ein Sof. So you're right. If it, or Ein Sof, or Ein Sof in our context is the level beyond grasp. Is the level beyond grasp. That level which is fundamentally beyond grasp to us is what we're going to refer to as Or Ein Sof. Okay? And that's from the Gra. That's Mefurish in the Gra. That's what it's being referred to.
I was thinking the Oyer is Ein Sof, it's the Oyer of the Ein Sof, no?
It's both and, but it's an or. It's a revelation of the Ein Sof. But let's go. I hear the question. Let's go weiter because it brings us back to the Kabbalah of Mahari Sarug, and I wanna keep it down. And avodah l'maisa. All of this is avodah l'maisa, by the way. This question of where's the center point, right? Lest anybody think this is esotericism, this is ultimately the question of any motivated activity and experience. What is my center here? What is the tachlis? There's an innermost point. There's a purpose behind creation. And that's only true if Hashem has a pre-existent plan that's being revealed. Existence is Hashem's revelation. And that inner Nakuda, that Merkaz HaEmsai Shabo, is that potential of godliness prior to existence that's coming into formation. As a dot, as a pointed dot, which contains everything within itself. Infinitesimal and infinite.
That dot is not Hashem.
That dot is avodah, not Hashem. But Hashem contains himself and reveals himself into that dot. The Mittler Rebbe makes this very clear in Shar Yichud. What we're referring to, this dot is referred to as the Reshimu, the Reshimu, the trace of infinite light that remains after the Tzimtzum. The trace of infinite light.
Does the Tzimtzum have to be there by definition if Hashem wants to create the world?
B'chlal not. It's Kadsa. Hashem desires. We have the tools that we have. We have the words of the tzaddikim.
The benefit, so it was created for the purpose of us to be able
To experience goodness, ultimately, to experience God's goodness, which is the revelation of godliness in places of apparent concealment. The greatest level of goodness and compassion that God gives us is our capacity to come to awareness and come to find His presence where we're at, in the darkness.
And that can only be done by being the Tzimtzum itself.
It could only be done by the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum is the miracle. The whole sugya is about the Tzimtzum. The whole Pnimiyas HaTorah is about the Tzimtzum. Because the Ari is talking about reality. And if we're talking about reality, we're talking about a place where God's existence is not present. We're talking about deficiency. If it's conscious, it's broken. If we're aware of it, it is imperfect by definition. Ve'az, right? Look at this post-tense nature of the Tzimtzum. Ve'az, it's like a sense of afterwardness. Like I'm showing up late to the scene. I don't know what happened beforehand. All I know is that now there's a Tzimtzum. Right? So Tzimtzum is always limitation. And if it's limitation, all we can grasp is the level of infinite light prior to us finding ourselves in separation. Everybody with me? It's you could see, meaning when a person is trying in life, when a person is struggling in life on any level, right? On any level, a person can awaken their minds to more divine presence in the place that they stand, and they can come to take the concealment of this world less seriously, and they come to almost laugh at how thick all of the concealment feels. So in that moment, a person is actually shifting their experience, and they're drawing down more infinite light. So that reality itself is becoming softer. Reality is softening itself. The histaklos hapnimi influences the histaklos hachitzoni. How we see internally influences how we see externally. Are we changing reality in some magical thinking way? No, but we're talking about the way in which reality came into being. So Mamela, when we say these words, it's like a pinball effect, that we shoot these words, if we're learning them lishma, we shoot these words all the way up to the place that they actually exist in some invisible, impossible way. And as a result, through spooky action out of a distance, if we have bittul, Hashem sends that hashpa'ah down. And if we're really machavein ourselves, then we get to realize that it's happening right now. That's the value of getting the menu. I know what I'm eating. Blind person can't fully enjoy their meal, Chazal tell us. They can't fully enjoy their meal. Because there's always going to be a lag. There's always going to be a lag between expectation of experience and experience itself. Vision enables a person to collapse the distance and duration between consciousness and experience.
So is that why the food critic enjoys his food so much more? Because he knows truly what's on the plate in front of him.
Yeah, the more and more right. And you see, the more cooking is, I watch these Michelin star chefs sometimes to relax. And you see, food is not excess, it's art, it's reduction, it's concealment, it's constriction, right? It's constriction and it's refinement until you have like this small tiny thing that looks minuscule, but from the perspective of the chef, there's endless levels of training and expertise and refinement of the trade that conveys this quintessential essence of their skill. That's what Brias Ha'olam is. Hashem, meaning Brias Ha'olam is not Hashem revealing like his superpowers, kaviyachal, that I can create anything. Even though infinite world theory, all of that fits in, all of the tzaddikim love those things. But the secret of revelation is Tzimtzum, that Hashem is condensing something infinite into a pointed expression.
So
It's what pashtus. It's the thing itself, so to speak. And again, I think, look, this is b'derech avodah. When we're talking about the Tzimtzum, why does it matter what the Tzimtzum is? If it's the revelation of Hashem's concealing power, or if it's the absencing of Hashem from the space. Because, what do you mean? How am I going to function in that moment of anxiety? Which one is going to give me more strength? If I'm looking at the world as a place that's removed from the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and somehow his ratzon is still mislabesh in the Torah and Mitzvos, and if I'm a big enough tzaddik in Torah and Mitzvos, then I can uncover, this whatever. No, that Tzimtzum Kipshuto perspective is gonna kill us. Right? The secret of Tzimtzum Shalom Kipshuto is that everything changes. There's not one thing in existence and consciousness and psychology that doesn't change when a person comes to realize that everything is taking shape within the realm of the absolute infinite nature of godliness. That's why I think this is, that's why it's called Otzros Chaim Hilama Chazikim Ba. Someone who's confident in the Otzros Chaim doesn't have to be machazik on it, right? You don't have to grab it. You have it, right? You have it. You don't have to be oiches so hard. But there's also a secret of Otzros Chaim Hilama Chazikim Ba, that it's also your Otzros Chaim, even if you're grabbing onto it, for dear life. It's the same if you grab onto it for dear life to secrete the hidden medicine that rests hidden within these words, then a person is also tasting from the Otzros Chaim. Even if you're not a Grace Makubal who fasts, and we do what we can. Tfilas Ezra is the best thing a person can do when it comes to taking this limud seriously.
You were saying before for a moment that when a person experiences Torah and seeing how thick it is and realizing, laughing at it, what did you mean by that?
My sense is that if we operate with, let's say our cognitive sets of mind and frames of mind are rooted in our belief systems and the faith systems that we inherit and we choose to occupy, right? So occupying faith means that the concepts begin to have a real lived impact on my conscious processes in this world, right? And so if the tenets of my faith are built upon the fact that God is infinite and one, but I live in a world of disparity and separation, so that's going to be the first theological thing I have to answer. There's two ways of answering that question, of how God can be one, and the world and existence can appear as many, and that manyness leads to every imaginable symptom, right? The first answer is that, okay, God is God, and God was once here and then he removed himself, but he still maintains a very deep bond and an unbroken connection through hashkacha and desire and witnessing with reality. So no matter how ugly it gets, it's still within the purview of God's hanhaga. That's one way. Where if you're the person in the stuckness, okay, God, am I deserving of this? Am I not deserving of this? Is it enough? Is it not? Versus the notion that, no, everything is God. All that exists is God. You never left the all-inclusive light of godliness. Within that infinite, unfathomable space of all rightness, infinite presence of God, all of the symptoms, all of the synonyms and symptoms that come from that, the way you deal with your issues is going to be different. You're going to have a different context through which you're experiencing the content of your life. One is going to be experienced in a dark world where it's kill or be killed and there's limitation and scarcity, and one is going to be lived with a rootedness to the best of our emunah in a sense of enoughness and calmness and all rightness. And so I think that has that will have a big impact on the way a person manages their symptoms of any type of anything. That makes sense?
What I heard a little bit earlier is that it almost sounds like this Nakud of America. It's almost like the Ratzin before, and then the Tzimtzum itself is just the Bapur.
Soif Ma'asa b'machshava tchila.
Right. But then my question would be then Machshava has to have a start. Surely there's a Chiddush, or was it always there? Did something change where there was a Machshava?
There was a Vada Tzimtzum Ritzoni. There was an original willingness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol to enter in to the possibility, which is then when we begin to discuss very delicately the notion of possibility, which already implies the possible expression outwards, even though that possibility need not be expressed right now. Right, like we said, that the Tzemach Tzedek said in the name of his grandfather, the best phrase that we have for this is called Yecholes, possibility. And I'm being far too clunky with the terms, because it's not a Farbrengen and we're not digging to get to the Havana and the Hispaninus. I'm trying to give klalim, so I'm speaking a little bit more broadly. But the term Yecholes and the emergence of the Yecholes, meaning these are the questions that are driving the tzaddikim to move forward, So the tzaddikim are waking up and trying to discern and figure out. Questions? Anything else, Chavra? So again, this Nekudas Americas is a very deep Inyan, and it really is the whole secret, but I don't know what time it is. Okay, so five more minutes I have.
As long as you want.
There's a historic thing that we're going to wash over and go over very quickly. And be'emes, a recommendation I want to give is that people should read Tarshish Shoyham the Yishpeh from Rav Moshe Shatz Shlita, who should have a complete refuah shlema, and really anything that I can share or any of my understanding in anything is from my experiences with Rav Moshe Shatz Shlita, and he should have a complete refuah shlema. But his sefer Tarshish Shoyham the Yishpeh, and then in English, the basic tenets of his outlook are developed by Avinoam Frankel Shlita, who I think he lives in Beit Shemesh, a remarkable person who I've yet to meet. He wrote 2 books. One is called Nefesh Tzimtzum, a 2-volume book on Nefesh Chaim, and then his second book called Shomer Amunim HaKadmon, which is not his book, but he translated these fundamental encyclopedic texts. And because of their profound light, I think like the world just kind of skimmed over them. But you read these books and you'll have a pretty full and complete download of really everything you need to know in terms of like the history of what's been written and the proper way to understand it. That's overstating it a bit, but especially in Shomer Amunim HaKadmon, in certain areas there, he spent hours and hours with Rav Itchemeyer clarifying points, and it's really a sefer that is nechshav as a real clarifying, clear sefer. But there's a historic notion of a machlokas between what Tzimtzum was. And this was referred to as Tzimtzum kipshuto or lo kipshuto, whether Tzimtzum is literal or figurative. Now we're going to jump beyond the figurative, literal concepts at the heart of Kabbalah, and we're going to jump beyond a lot. I'm like being medalig and makapetz and trying to be mitzamsem this nakuda, but there seems to be a way of reading the Tzimtzum process in one of 2 ways: an actual removal of that original saturating divine presence for the space of something new to take shape, and that infinite presence, so to speak, that concealed itself never fully enters back in. It's actually removed to one degree or another, and the pathways of Ratzon and Torah and Mitzvos and Olam HaAtzilus, that's the miracle, right? Because, and I can't skip over this. I'm not going to skip over this. We're going to next week talk about Tzimtzum Kipshuto and Lav Kipshuto, and how the Vilna Gaon and his students and the Baal Shem Tov and his students understand this worldliness. That's ultimately the real question at stake. Everybody agrees about the world of Atzilus. The question is the worlds of Biyah, the worlds of existence. If you hold Tzimtzum is not real, or it's not an actual concealment, then these worlds of separation have a very different form and shape than if you feel that God has actually concealed his light from these worlds, where that form and shape is not accessible. And therein lies the whole Nakuda, but we'll spend a week on it. We'll spend the week on it in Mirz Hashem next week. And again, what I can offer is that as a Chabur, I'm still pontificating, but if there's pushback, if there's redirection, I'm happy to, meaning I have to try and be mitzamsim questions, because each question ideally leads into the shir itself. Right? There's the Nekuda HaPnimis and there's the Sliva. There's the Merkaz. A center point implies a periphery. And what can be missed is that when you're focusing on the midpoint, you come to forget the significance of what he refers to as Hatstadin v'Hasvivos, the edges and kind of the surrounding, encompassing circles, which is like the meaninglessness of life, the dreams and the waste and the struggles and the things that don't appear to fit into the center narrative. And that's as much a part of the story And that's what we're going to see also with Igulim, and so it's good. It's a beautiful book. The double lashons can always be. There's I forget exactly which Mefarshim say this, but the Eifa Shlema I think says this, but I don't want to quote it in his name. But with the double lashons of the Ari, always every word of the Ari can be nidrash. Rosh Tevos can be nidrash. Gematrias can be nidrash. Meaning that the book's written by the tzaddikim amitim, as Rabbi Nachman says. The reader can find far more in it than the author could have ever imagined to intend. So, okay. Say there, Chavra.